And Om Shanti, a greeting of peace to my sisters and my brothers.
And
hello,
from
Philippa.
me. Hello, Sister Jayanti, and a very warm welcome from me too. And thanks to Nima and Lena for your lovely introduction. It's a real pleasure to be with you today. Sister Jayanti and myself are speaking to you from the UK, where unusually we have a beautiful sunny day, and it's a holiday weekend. We have an extra day holiday this weekend, so everyone is feeling very good here. So I hope you're catching those vibrations of sunlight and happiness. And we're beginning our whole series of purity with this word awareness, which is a word that we use every day, but do we really understand what it means? So perhaps, Sister Jayanti, we could just really begin with looking at why for you awareness is such a good place to begin when we try and understand this subject of purity.
Thank you, Philippa. Yes, it's important to understand what awareness is and where it comes from. How does it begin? And I think that the starting point to be able to imbibe purity within myself, to inculcate it in myself, is to begin with this word awareness. And so just a question to everyone on this conference link. What am I aware of at this moment? Am I aware of the temperature around me, the ambience? Am I aware of who I am as a human being, a personality in my own right? What is touching my awareness? And probably the body has got used to whatever temperature there is around you. So there's a sort of awareness, but it's at the back of your mind. And there's an awareness of who I am as a human being, with my roles, my responsibilities, my position, my possessions, all of that is there within my awareness. But awareness can be quite different. Instead of just focused on this external situation, can I be aware of what's going on inside my own mind and my consciousness? Now that's quite a 180-degree turnaround, moving from the outside, even though I'm talking about I, but that's still the outside, and moving to the inside. And so awareness is what I'm thinking about, connected very much with my own beliefs about myself and others, and it's also connected with my feelings.
It's something that we do absorb from our environment, as you're saying. We in a way develop an awareness in the family that we grow up in the education that we have, and the society or community that we live in. And more increasingly, we're aware of the global situation as well. So we have all these influences that are coming into our awareness and shaping the thoughts that are going on inside my own mind. How do you distinguish between the level of awareness that is coming from outside and the level of awareness that is arising from deep within me? And is there an awareness that is intrinsic to the true self, the real self, that doesn't depend upon those external influences? I'm trying to understand and maybe separate these two influences, the outside and the inside, and get a better grip of where each is coming from.
Most of the time, what happens is that it's all those other things that you mentioned so eloquently, all the things that are outside. I won't repeat them. People will remember what you just told them. And so all of those things are impinging my mind. I'm bringing in another word here. And the mind is that which is within. And the mind is the energy that is creating thoughts. And so my thinking is being impacted by all the things that are happening outside. And I'm reacting to all of this. And I use the word reacting very consciously, in the sense that, you know, it's like we're on autopilot. I see a fire and I smell the smoke and it's danger and I need to run. That's one very positive aspect. But say, for example, I see a dog and there's a hidden memory deep inside of me in which I was harmed by a dog, physically harmed. And so that comes up and I want to run. I'm in a panic and maybe I can't run. I'm breaking out in a sweat. So most of the time, I would say maybe 95% of the time, we're simply operating on this model of what I know from my own immediate feelings and experiences. And so that comes out. But there's a different way to approach things. Maybe the dog is quite innocent, and maybe the dog is just approaching me to experience the warmth of a human being. Maybe there's no bad intentions that the dog has and no bad reactions that I need to have, but there's a trigger. And apparently I'm told that all these impressions that we are burdened with, I will say that knowingly again, are the imprints that I carry from up until age 6. These are imprints that are absolutely there within the soul. And so there's this trigger reaction, and it can happen with people, color, people of color, people of different race, different religion. There's a reaction. And is it possible to change all of these? Yes, I believe it is. But one needs to have a different type of understanding. And so I need an education, a spiritual education that's going to teach me how to change this autopilot reaction and make it a more reasonable response. Yes, it's right that I should instinctively flee from danger, but sometimes there isn't danger, and yet I'm in a panic about something. And so if every time there's a perception of panic and I'm reacting in this way, I'm never going to actually come to any sense of reality. And so, yes, it's possible. We understand that the brain has plasticity and it's possible to change the neural pathways so we're able to go back to a different type of awareness that stems from my innermost identity as a non-physical being, a soul, that which is spiritual, and connecting with myself internally in that way, there's a more mature, a more measured response rather than reactivity.
So what you're describing here with this reaction from experiences that I have had in the past is really touching on this other word that is linked to our topic today, which is the Hindi word Sanskaras, which we're interpreting as subconscious tendencies or impressions. So this is yet another influence on my awareness, as you're describing. It's not just from the external, but it's also triggers from my past. But I'd like to push you on this 5% as opposed to the 95% that you mentioned. And I'm wondering if it's possible to, through practice, get to a place of awareness where you are experiencing the other 5%. And what is that? I mean, you have been practicing an observation of awareness on yourself for it's more than half a century now. So you're talking very much from a place of experience. And I'd like to know whether you feel there is a place of awareness that lies above and beyond all these influences that we have talked about. And if so, what is that? And maybe you could bring in this symbol that you have behind you, and we had on that beautiful slideshow at the beginning of this point of light. What does that represent, and how does that link into purity?
Thank you, Philippa. I'm talking about the pathway of meditation, about spirituality. And of course, spirituality is a big subject, and meditation is one path within that journey into spirituality. And when I say meditation, I don't mean focusing on your navel or focusing on the sunset or anything like that, because there's so many types of meditation out there in the marketplace today, and they all carry a price tag. But real spirituality has no price tag. That's one thing. But also the meditation that I talk about is very much an introversion journey into my own inner being. And when I connect with that inner being, and this is why I have that symbol behind me, because my understanding of the non-physical part of me, which is the being, the human is the physical, the biology, the physiology, and all of this we know about, but we know very little about the spiritual side of my identity. And so I'm wanting to explore that. And so going deeper and deeper within myself, firstly, just by watching my thoughts, observing my thoughts. And of course, at that moment, my thoughts are usually related to everything that's going on and so on. And sometimes the trigger that triggers a reaction from my images and impressions collected through my years, and something then comes out. But now it's not like that. I'm going very consciously into the awareness of the spiritual being that I am, which is radiant, which is a point of light, an illumination that's able to shine. And it's illumination not just in terms of its form, but the more I understand my own identity as this being, the more I'm able to know that this is who I am, a luminous point of energy, of consciousness, the creator of thoughts, the creator of awareness, and in fact, feelings. But yes, as you pointed out, this inner being, this being that I am that resides here, is not just absorbing and reacting to things from outside, but it's possible to go deep within the self and come to this awareness of who I am as a spiritual being, a being of light. And so we use this description, Om Shanti, this expression, to describe the inner feeling of Om, I am, Shanti, peace. I am peace. This is my natural state of being. And when I'm in touch with Om, Shanti, the inner being of peace, I realize that purity is my natural state of being, as is peace and love and truth. And so it's an amazing experience to know that whatever I thought of myself as before, maybe superior, maybe inferior, maybe I fluctuated between the two, I'm now able to touch into myself and know that my original state of being is purity. And that's a very, very lovely feeling of joy and freedom, that I'm not my anger, I'm not my greed, I'm not my attachment. I am pure in my natural state, my original state. But of course, what I am deep inside and what I'm expressing outside are very often quite separate things. And so there's a cleanup job to do between the inside and the outside, so that I'm able to clean away all the other rubbish and really sparkle as that soul that's filled with purity.
I mean, that could be a challenging idea for some people because they know themselves well enough to know that actually, you know, they've got as many weaknesses as the next person, as many defects, as many, you know, challenges going on. And they may look at someone like you and say, well, look, I can see that for Sister Jayanti, purity is something that she embodies and represents and shines out. But that's not really me. I don't see myself as that. I don't see how that relates to me. How do I get myself into a place of feeling this intrinsic quality of purity as seen through a spiritual lens? Because it may be a quality that I've just never identified myself with in the past.
I'm sure that all our viewers can recall a moment when they connected with something they saw as very pure. Maybe the first impact of snowfall that you witnessed, and you saw that beautiful carpet that was absolutely pristine white and clean before animals and people treaded on it and made it unclean. And it created a sense of wonder in you. There was something within you that resonated with that. You see a little infant, so innocent, so pure, and it touches you deeply, and you want to reach out and comfort it and give it a cuddle or just caress it. Or you see a beautiful flower, many things that happen in our lives that take us out of our skin, in a sense, and touch into that which is deep within me, and we resonate with that. Maybe it's a sunset, maybe it's a sunrise, maybe it's a poem, maybe it's a song. But from time to time, we catch a glimpse of us that's warm and pure and clean and soft and not hard. So often life has treated us what we think is unwell, though of course there's a whole understanding behind that also. But what we've done is we've put down the shutters and we've closed ourselves off to those inner warm, loving feelings, those pure feelings that exist in every human being. And so what I'm doing now is very consciously allowing those barriers to dissolve and just go back into myself. You know, the hardest prisoner in a cell melts when they see something that touches them deeply. I remember Daddy Jayanti going to a prison here in the UK because a prisoner had heard something about her, had heard in those days, had heard a tape recording of her voice, and something resonated, and he'd created this amazing desk. He'd carved it himself. And the education officer invited us to a little ceremony where he would present it to us. Well, it became quite a big ceremony because apparently when the other prisoners heard that this was going, they wanted to be there, fine. And they all then, with their very meager pocket money, organized to buy a flower that they could present to Dadi. So even before she arrived, something warm had softened them. And Dadi arrived and they lined up and they handed her a rose. Each one of them came forward. And Dadi's used to this eye contact in which there's an exchange of vibration. And it was all in silence. But Dadi spoke their language, not English. It was a language of the heart. It was a language of silence. It was a language of purity with no other motives there except just to be present and share love from Dadi's side. And that melted them all. I won't tell you what they were in prison for, but it wasn't anything very good. It was rather nasty. But this was a scene I've witnessed. And so I know that even the most hardened criminal has that very, very soft, pure innocence within their heart that they've not allowed themselves to touch. And so now, forget about external things. Can I go so deeply inside that I find the peace that I'm really longing for? And when I find that peace, I can go even deeper. And I'll find that purity which is there within the soul, every human being.
That's a very moving story that you shared of Daddy Jayanti, who was the head of the Brahmakumaris until she died a couple of years ago. And I think for those of us who have had the privilege of meeting greatness or meeting a truly pure soul, it does stop you in your tracks, because there is something there that lifts you out of any limitations you may have felt. You were saying a moment ago about the purity of freshly fallen snow, the purity of a newborn baby. I'm wondering if there is something about purity that moves through a cycle, that when something is first created or is new, it has this quality of purity, which then lessens as time goes on, and that somehow that is a quality that can be recovered or reclaimed at a later date. Is there a cyclical narration almost to this theme of purity?
Absolutely. And just as you mentioned, the snow or the baby, as things age, there is a tendency to have accumulated a lot of experiences. And in the current times that we live in, mostly it is negative experiences, but there are moments that were beautiful and real and authentic and touched your heart. And so we tend to dwell more on the immediate experiences that we are having, which are usually unpleasant ones, because the world has become a very negative state. And so it's hard work sometimes to believe it, but it's true. I was born with purity and things changed through my life. But now it's possible for me to discover that real purity and come back to it. But this time now I'm conscious, I'm aware. And so I know how to maintain it and nurture it and allow it to grow and carry me forward. And so, yes, there is a cyclical aspect about all this.
You mentioned as well that in a way, the foundation or the beginning point of this journey is knowledge or understanding, because without right knowledge or true understanding, you can't get to true awareness. And once you come to awareness, you then begin to experience this quality of purity, as we're talking about. What then comes as a byproduct of touching into this experience of purity? Because we have these other three words, peace, happiness, and prosperity, through purity. In what way do they come through purity?
Just think about it. When I'm angry, I'm very far away from purity, but also I'm very far away from peace. And so why we don't experience peace so often, why we feel peaceless most of the time, is because we're looking at the externals and allowing these to trigger our feelings and emotions. And things that are negative are going on. I'm watching TV, even the ads sometimes have violence. You know, somebody's kicking somebody and suddenly they're flying and they land up in another place. And it's totally fantasy. You kick somebody and they don't fly. They end up hurt with a lot of pain. Now, so much violence has been fantasized as something that's amazing. And this is powerful. This is the way to be real. This is the way to conquer the world. And I'm not just talking about TV and films now, but that's the image that's been presented to us all along. And so we've forgotten that when I go inside, the first step of my experience is peace. When I experience peace, I begin to catch a glimpse of purity and love. And what I need to do is to continue with my attention on the awareness of the inner being, the soul, I, the soul. And if I keep my awareness focused here, not on a physical level, I don't need to be rubbing this, but just that awareness that I am this inner being. And if I maintain a state of calm and peace through my interactions with others, I'm going to start feeling that purity at work within myself more and more. And so this isn't just an exercise for 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the night, but, well, that's good. If that's what you're doing in your meditations, please do carry on with that. But this is, spirituality is a way of life, a way of being. And so it's not separate from the rest of my life. It impacts everything that I do. Consciousness impacts everything that I do. And so what I need to do is to cultivate this awareness of I, a soul, a being of peace, and I begin to experience purity more and more in my life. But I'll also begin to have a flavor, a taste of what real love is, rather than artificial love that can be bought with a bunch of flowers or a box of chocolates.
How do we marry this conversation that we're having with what for many people is their experience of the so-called real world? Because it's very hard to find examples of purity in this world. You know, food isn't pure. Often relationships aren't pure. There's ulterior motives going on there. People are always wanting to get something out of everything for themselves. And for many, that is just the way the world is. And they may be feeling that what you're presenting here is actually, you know, it's just a bit bold. It's a bit unattainable. It's not how things are. Why are you so concerned with this whole subject of purity? And what do you see happening as a result of people focusing on purity? Why does it matter?
The world that I'm seeing is a world that we're all familiar with all the sorrow, the degradation, the pollution, the economy in a state of collapse in most places around the world, violence everywhere on so many different levels. Even in the food that we eat, there's so much violence connected with that. So the list is infinite, it's endless. And certainly there's no peace out there. So why is it that I still long for peace? But of course, what I think is that if I go to the seaside, I'll experience peace, but maybe not. Maybe I go to the seaside and what I remember from my childhood was this clean, uncrowded space. And now there's hawkers who are selling their wares all along the beachside, and it's crowded and the water isn't even clean anymore. And so what happened? But I remember I had seen it so clean and pure. And in my lifetime, in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, people have seen so much dramatic change. And usually, yes, in technology for the better, for good reason, but most times in natural situations, a degradation. So you personally have seen how from purity, there is impurity. Even in food, what we used to eat as children and what we feed our children today, there's such a vast difference in terms of the goodness and the richness and the nourishment and the cleanliness. It's visible, it's become visible, and you can feel it as you taste it and eat it. So the same thing. There was a time when I was pure. There was a time when the world was totally clean and pure, not just a beach here and there, but the planet was clean and pure. Just as your children find it difficult to believe that, you know, in a place where they are living, it wasn't just a concrete jungle. There were trees growing just behind your backyard. It was parkland. It was open space, very different to today. In 10 years, 20 years, there's been such a difference. And children find it hard to believe that, but you show them the photographs and they think, well, that was then. And they dismiss it. But I also have been on a journey. I began my journey clean and pure. Let me believe it. Let me experiment with it. Don't even believe it. let me experiment with it. If I can connect with peace inside, rather than look for peace outside, which doesn't exist anymore, go to a beach, and even though it seems beautiful, somebody will come along with a transistor radio or whatever, and there'll be noise generated. The forests that we thought were going to be there forever in our lifetime, they're gone. Really, they're not there. We cut them down for money. And we forgot about all the other things that the trees were doing for my body, for my soul and my heart. So take a trip and just imagine that you were in a pure state when you started your journey. And just imagine what it felt like. It felt so comfortable. It felt totally free. And now, as I begin to come to that awareness and cultivate it, I'll experience this amazing freedom in which I can make my choices with wisdom and move towards the future that I would like to see happen. I am the creator of my future. And if today I can visualize my own pure state of being and visualize purity in the world, on the planet around me, now that is a very bright future that lies ahead. And humans cleaning out all the stuff that we've been carrying for some years, with God's love, with God's remembrance, with God's power, and we're going to find ourselves taking more and more of that experience into our lives here and now. And I'll begin to believe it when I see this happen. Then I'll say, yes, I believe it now. But experiment with the idea and see where it takes you. And then, yes, when I feel that purity emerging, freedom immediately is a very lovely experience that one has, because we've associated freedom with all sorts of material things. You know, when I got my first car, when I was able to vote, when I was able to get the key to the door, all of these are big milestones in the life of a young person. And that's great. Of course, there's freedom at one level, but freedom in that sense where I consciously choose how to think, how to see, how to understand, how to make decisions, how to make choices that are going to create a better world. Now that's the freedom that purity gives me. And immediately, when I begin to feel that freedom, I also begin to regain my lost self-esteem. I'd forgotten how valuable I am. I'd been thinking that the size of my house is a reflection of my character or my own personality, or the size of my car or the size of my bank account. No. That can be obtained, all these things, by devious means that are no indication of character at all. My real character and my real value lie within the self, within the spirit, the soul. And so purity emerging means I'm now making the right decisions based on my inner core values and the principles that I hold to be important. Otherwise, without that experiment of going deep inside, I don't even know what are the principles of my life. You know, you walk into companies, and many places now, they have this big board on which values and vision and mission and purpose and all of these things are listed. But then people sort of ignore, well, that's what it says. That's not what we do. But no, now I've never thought about it. What are my principles that I want to live by? What is the code of conduct based on values that I would like to have? So this journey inwards is helping me discover all these things about myself that I didn't even know about. it's like here was a hidden pearl. And because I didn't open up the shell, I never saw the pearl. I didn't recognize the value. I just thought there's a shell and that's it. And I kicked it away. No, inside this shell is this shining pearl, the soul. And each and every soul is valuable. And each and every soul does have core values and principles. And based on purity, I again emerge those values and practice them in my life.
So purity is very much becoming a driver, a catalyst for change. And I can feel your optimism that what you're saying, and I can see in you that this belief has brought about change in your life. But you're just one person, and you're speaking these beautiful things, and it sounds amazing. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, you know, the United Nations has now been going for 75 years, trying to build freedom and peace and possibly not purity, but it's there somewhere in the mix. You know, the European Union has been about creating a better world post-war. And yet all we see is things getting worse, not better. Why is your vision going to achieve something where all these other organizations and the individuals haven't managed to do it? In other words, what is spirituality bringing to the conversation here that is actually going to make a difference that we can see tangibly, rather than it just being nice words?
If you look at what all these places and people and organizations have done, is look at the external. And it was very interesting when in the year 2000, at the time of the Millennium Peace Summit, that Jayanti was invited to speak there at the UN in New York. And I was part of her accompanying delegation. So there was a grand opening ceremony with people in colorful costumes from all over the world, sharing the chanting of Om, sharing Sufi prayers and things that were unimaginable a little while earlier happening in the General Assembly room. And that was a beautiful experience. But the second day was very moving for me, because it was at that time around 50 plus years that the UN had been in existence, around 55 years, I think. But what happened at that moment was the lineup was all the Assistant Secretary Generals and the Under Secretary Generals. And all of them were asked to present what it is that had happened in their 55 years of their particular unit. And so it was people like UNESCO Education who was there, people like UNICEF, the Children's Place, the environmental agencies, the Labour International Organization, WHO was there, everybody was there. But what we heard from every single person, even WHO, who said that, yes, we've beaten polio, we've beaten smallpox, all this has happened, but we are not able to deal with mental illness, and we see an epidemic of mental illness happening in the near future. And of course, the pandemic has exacerbated that, but it was already there, but it's just like highlighted it. So they were talking about things, and that was the only organization that actually had something tangible to report that was positive. Conquering polio and smallpox was wonderful, but they also had a downside to share, and which we're seeing as a big reality today. But everyone else had just a tale of woe, because they said that we have more human resources, we have more information, we have more technology, we have more money, we have more of everything, but things have gotten worse. And this is why we've called all of you, the spiritual and religious leaders, that there might be something that you know that you can offer that can bring about change. And then about 2 years ago, I was invited by one of the departments of the UN to present the concept of spirituality within the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. And I was able to share with them the concept of how spirituality teaches us to go within and connect with purity, but more than that, not just purity, the love and the truth and the joy that lies within. And if we can allow people to experience this, even for a short while, then that experience is going to motivate them in two different ways. Within the developed world, a higher motivation of compassion and support for my human family, and for the underdeveloped, the developing world, as they call it, within the developing world, it can also trigger that awareness that they have the power to bring about change within their own community and society and country. Because at the moment they feel disempowered, they feel controlled, they feel powerless, they feel everybody just ordering them around without consultation, without thinking about what their real needs are, etc., etc. And so all the missions by the UN haven't been able to turn around poverty or bring about enough food for all, never mind anything else, but just basic food for all as human beings who have a right to live in this planet. That hasn't happened. Climate change scientists have been screaming since 1972 that this is on the horizon. And yesterday, what did I hear? For the first time, they had rainfall, not snowfall, in Greenland. And what does that say? That says that the temperatures have risen to a state never seen before. And it also tells us that the ice is melting. Now, that's not far away from my world. That sort of change is impacting everywhere. The wildfires that you're seeing in the USA, Canada, also the floods that have been happening in so many places, again, in the USA, but also in India, but also in London. In the UK, we've been seeing floods that we've never seen before. So all this is here and now. And external things have not been able to change this, but internal, changing the will and the awareness of people, the recognition of one family, and coming together as one family. We can tackle climate change, we can tackle environmental degradation, we can tackle violence, we can do everything. We can change the world. We truly can.
Wow. I mean, that is a vision, isn't it? That global organizations and international governments can come to people of spirit and ask for help on what to do, because everything else isn't working. And that really puts this conversation on another level, because it makes what we're talking about not just a pastime for those that have got leisure and time to spare. You know, this is a fundamental, crucial activity for us all to be engaging with at this time. And it begins with awareness. It begins with getting in touch with that inner purity, because from that, everything else is released. I'm going to ask you a question in a moment, Sister Jayanti, but before I do, I'd like to just say that the chat box is now open. So if you've been listening to what Sister Jayanti has been saying and you have any questions that you would like to ask, we do have a little time for questions. So do please post your questions if you'd like to in the chat box. But Sister Jayanti, I'm wondering, for anyone who feels really inspired by what you've been talking about and feels that they want to take a next step on this journey of becoming aware of their awareness, of finding out what actually is going on inside this inner landscape of the mind, what would you give in the form of a homework practice that people can take away and do that could really begin to see change happening within themselves?
One very simple thing to do is to sit down quietly and just watch where your thoughts are going. What is it that's running through your mind? And what do you notice? And the second thing is, after the observation, can you now take charge of those thoughts and allow the speed of those thoughts to slow down and gradually make the spaces between the thoughts longer than the thoughts, and see what happens. See if that process is able to allow you to experience even a moment of the inner peace that you are, that you have within you.
And if you can see these thoughts coming by, like, you know, one after another at a dizzying rate, how do you slow them down so that you can look out for that space between the thoughts? Because, you know, it's like buses going past, you know, you can't control them. They're just going past you. And yet, can you control them? How can you slow them down?
Usually it happens in a very natural way. When I'm not aware that I am the creator of my thoughts and there's a whizzing around that's non-stop. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's the same thought that keeps whizzing around. And that can be very sad because it's probably a negative thought that's ongoing. But a natural thing that happens when you step away from yourself, in a sense, and observe these thoughts, they seem to automatically slow down. Don't get caught up in the thoughts and the feelings and the emotions of the situation of the day that's generating those thoughts. Don't do that. Just detach in the sense of you're watching a screen and you're watching all these thoughts. And you'll probably find that just that simple process of being detached and observing this screen, you'll experience that thoughts are slowing down. But if they don't, you can be proactive and say, okay, those are thoughts that happen during the day. I want to go deeper inside and see what's inside my own inner world. And so as you begin to take that journey inwards, those whizzing, speedy thoughts are genuinely left behind. So try both methods and see what works for you.
And you're not aiming to get to a place beyond any awareness. It's not like we're trying to empty the mind. There will always be a thought there. We're just trying to slow them down and perhaps focus on the thoughts which make us feel good.
As you said, you can't stop your mind creating thoughts, but you can decide what sort of thoughts I want to create. And so you're gently leading your mind in the right direction so that it begins to experience a moment of peace, a moment of purity and truth. And so this is why Raj Yoga meditation is a very natural process. It doesn't force you to force your mind into stillness or become empty. That's not the purpose of meditation. The purpose of meditation is to change the direction of my thinking, where my thinking is totally connected with the body and the things out there. Now, I want to connect it with the deeper aspect of the self, the being that I am, and explore that dimension, which is then called the spiritual dimension. So we are all spiritual beings. There's nobody who's not spiritual. I hear this often, I'm not at all spiritual. And then you see them talk to a child with such love. Well, that is spirituality at work. where you're expressing the love and the warmth that is within the soul. And so everybody is a spiritual being that we've forgotten. And so creating thoughts in terms of slowing them down and coming to an experience of peace is the way to be able to realize that I am that inner being, the spiritual being.
Well, our questions are beginning to come in thick and fast. So let's just see if we can take up a few of them. The first one is, how can I hold on to my pure loving self in situations which are difficult? And we've all been through this in the past 18 months, extremely intensely challenging situations, relationships, life situations. Against the backdrop of all of that, are you saying it is still possible to carve out a moment to have this practice, or is that unrealistic?
I would suggest that you create space in your timetable, and the ideal time is before the rest of the family awakens, which means you're missing out a little bit on your sleep, but the advantages that you're gaining far outweigh the time of sleep. Believe me, try it. And so carve out a little space of time before your day actually begins to run. And in that precious time, take the time to recharge your own inner battery. This is what has happened. We've used the battery for so long that it's run out of energy and we don't know how to recharge it. What do you do with your phone? You recharge it every night and it wouldn't work for you otherwise. And this energy has been operating the whole of my life and I've never bothered to recharge it. It's time for the recharge. And so going into silence, going to the inner being is the beginning of the recharge process that will help me through a very critical day. And you'll see the results instantly. It's not that you practice for years and then you see the results. Try it out tomorrow morning or even at the end of this event, and you'll feel how going into silence is like oxygen for the soul. It's giving you new life.
Love it. That's a very practical thing which everyone can do. Set the alarm earlier and carve out a bit of time for yourself. Another question here. How do we stay consistent with this practice of connecting with our inner peace? Because you can, yes, sit down for 10, 15 minutes, have a lovely experience, but then you walk out of the front door, leave the house, and instantly you see something that really annoys you. Somebody speaks at you in the wrong way, you know, a car drives past and splashes you, and it's all gone out the window. And, you know, you're now back down at the bottom. How do you level out these fluctuations of awareness?
Another very practical tip. It is adding to the trip inside, but it's a very practical thing to do. And that is every time you take a drink, whether it's your tea, coffee, water, whatever it may be, just take a moment to go inside. No matter how busy you are, nobody's going to tell you, don't pause and take a sip of water. They can't. And so when you're drinking something, when you're giving nourishment to the body, when you're eating something, take that time to recharge your own inner battery. Don't take that time as a chance for more conversation and interaction. That's lovely, and there's another time for that. But this time, that moment of refreshing the body is also the moment for you to connect with yourself and recharge yourself. So the time before the family is your private time, but then you come down to breakfast and you're having breakfast with the kids and everybody else. But at the time while everybody's having their toast, their water, their coffee, whatever it may be, you also are giving nourishment to the body. But even with one thought, remember, I'm this shining star, nothing else, just this image of this shining star. And your kids will see you begin to smile and they'll say, what happened? And you just say, well, I love you all. That's what's happened. So little things like this, just every time you take refreshment for the body, give refreshment to the mind by just the thought of remembering this shining star.
I like that, because it means that you don't have to necessarily sit down for a full 10 minutes or whatever. It can just be the amount of time it takes you to take a sip of water, and the practice can be as quick as that, reconnecting back to that inner feeling of purity that we've been talking about. Another question, which may have to be our last one because we are running out of time now, but how do we detach from expectations that we might have of seeing results on this spiritual journey, on this practice, and possibly feeling disappointed that we're not seeing things quick enough? How do we manage those expectations?
The only expectation I should begin with is, am I able to connect with myself? And don't go further than that. When I can connect with myself, I will immediately start experiencing that peace. Like you said, Philippa, just in a moment, just with a sip of water. And so that's the only thing to keep in mind. Don't think about, I'm going to become a beacon of light, I'm going to become this, that, or the other, or other people are going to say, you're an amazing yogi. None of that. That's all external. My real concern is to stay connected with the being that I am. That's it. And you'll see the results as they unfold, when and whatever they may be. But what I want is just to stay connected with me, the real I.
And in a way, that's easy to say and hard to do. But in another way, it's actually not hard. It's as easy as just having a thought. And then from that thought will come the experience. There's no need to make it complicated. It's actually not.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to move into a little meditation to round off our time together. There's a question that's come in that you may be able to weave into our meditation time together. And it's a question of what kind of actions can we take to expedite the oneness feeling, for all to work together in the shortest amount of time to tackle global warming, for example. So how do we create a sense of global connection, all pulling together in the same direction to turn this ship around? What action can I take that will be the catalyst for seeing global shift happening?
I'm going to give just a simple spiritual response, because I think if we get our spirituality together, other things will flow from that. Can I see others as that shining star and go beyond whatever is the color of their skin, the clothes that they wear that tell me that they belong to this religion or that religion or the other religion? I'm not interested. I'm interested in connecting with the eternal being, that being of light. So first step is just seeing myself as that being of light. The next step is to, when I look at others, eyes open, you're not meditating in the traditional way of closing your eyes are wide open, and you see a stranger, but you realize that this isn't a stranger, this is my brother. And I can connect with the soul. And if you smile at a stranger because you're seeing them as a brother, can you imagine what it sparks within them and the response you're going to get? So try it in this way, just a very simple experiment, and keep yourself motivated to keep doing this, because seeing you, others around you will notice this and will say, what are you looking at? What's making you smile? What's going on? Tell us. So one individual can bring about change in their little world, but from that little world, others take inspiration. And there's many, many circles all over the world, and they all connect together. And I think we can truly create a world family, sisterhood, brotherhood, whichever term it is you want to use, but truly a global family.
There are some lovely comments in with huge appreciation for everything that you have been sharing with us today. Such depth, such wisdom, such practical insights. We really have covered a lot of ground. And it would be nice to just take a few moments together to just absorb some of that. And maybe you could give us a little insight into where your awareness goes when you meditate, by just sharing with us a few words as you take us into an experience of this inner purity, this inner awareness of the true being that I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippa, and thank you to everyone who's organized this and to everyone who's taken the time to listen and watch. So sitting comfortably, eyes open, I watch my thoughts. There are questions that I have. There are beliefs that have been challenged. But as I observe my thoughts, they slow down. And as they slow down, I visualize a point of light in the center of my forehead and connect with this being. I am this being of light. I'm separate to this physical body because I'm not physical. My thoughts go to the past, the future, within moments. My body cannot do this, but I, the soul, with my mind, with my thoughts, have the power to do this because I, the inner being, am not physical. I am consciousness. I am spiritual. I am peace. I begin to touch the peace that lies within. And as peace opens up, I also find purity emerging from within. Innocence, clean, sparkling. Not only am I a being of peace, I am also a being of purity. And this light shines and gets brighter and brighter. And I hold this feeling and this awareness as I come back to the moment here and now. Become aware of the physical dimension again. But now I can keep the light shining brightly. Om Shanti.